Hey everyone, it's been a while since we've done a solo episode, so I thought I'd give the people what they want. So let's get into today's episode. Hey everyone, I hope you're well playing on and making the games that you all love. And I hope that you and your family are all safe. You're joining me, your host, Max Perez, Senior Level Designer over at CD Projekt Red. Thank you very much for tuning in. As I said, I hope that you're all well and your loved ones are safe too. And just, yeah, thank you very much for joining. It's been a while, like I said at the start, it's been so long since I think we've done a solo episode. A lot of them have been more tie-ins with recent launches, or that being more interviews. So I do apologize. I guess it's just been the way things panned out. I said in the episode that came out last week as well, been a little bit busy with a few other things too, such as that of family issues, as well as a big change coming in my life. So there's been a lot just going on. So I apologize for the inconsistency, but just know that I'm always here. Tuesdays are our days, and that's the most important thing, with that smooth jazz grazes your ears. And already saying that, I instantly feel like someone could sue me for saying something like that. So we won't be using that phrase moving forward. But yes, it's been a while, and what better way to return with a very interesting topic, and I think it's one that isn't necessarily discussed so much. Like, it's very much a part of our design, but I think it as a topic isn't always talked about. So I want to talk a bit about it, and that's called spatial composition. But first, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than me. What I've done, everyone, and I hope you're excited for this, is I've actually created a level design kind of store. What I've done in this store is put up different kinds of tips and tricks that you can find there, whether that be my actual ebook itself, to that of level design pamphlets focused on different things such as traversal, stealth, breaking into the industry, as well as different talks that I have done which you cannot find anywhere else other than on this store. So if you are looking to improve on your level design skills and processes, then check out the Level Design Store, which will be down in the description below, where there'll be a link to find this. All you need to do is head over to gumroad.com/level design lobby. I hope you like what you see, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you, and now back to the show. And for those of you who may not know, I'll give a brief introduction how I believe spatial composition is. I think some people may, add to it, take something away, but this is my understanding of it and the way that I use it. And kind of talking about, like, how do we create spatial composition? What's its purpose? How does it fit into the level design process? All of these elements. So let's just talk about that. So spatial composition is, think about it, is how we lead the player through our spaces. It's how that we guide them. As we all know, when playing games, we as the LDs, we as the developers, actually don't have any control over what the player is doing, where they're heading, and how they're going to interact with the world from time to time. We obviously have an ideal route the player may want to take, an ideal way that they interact with the space. That's why we have things such as golden paths and many others, right? We create events to happen in certain ways, certain areas that it takes place, all of these. But one of the ways that we communicate, or try to communicate in which way the player should go, is through that of spatial composition. And this covers a range of topics that we've talked some about before and others not yet. But spatial composition is the way that we communicate subconsciously to the player in order to guide them, in order for them to move through the space, in order for it to be clear what it is that is important in this level, what it is that the player should value when they're progressing through your level, what is the objective. It's an aid for that. Imagine it just being the aid to how players flow through your level. Think of it as the famous quote of Bruce Lee, "Be like water," right? But think about that as in when we're the players of the water and they're trying to flow through our levels. We're trying to communicate when they should crash into combat, when they should go down a quiet stream in order to catch their breath, and when they should move as fast as they can throughout the space, right? That to me is spatial composition. As I said, there's many different techniques that form this in how we communicate. Some, cross other categories, others, as I said, we've talked about, so we'll go through it and all of that. But let's talk about composition, because some of you may not know what that is, and then, as I said, we'll go into further detail of spatial composition afterwards. So composition is a technique that's used in a lot more than just that of level design, right? It's used in other forms or other mediums of art, whether that be photography, paintings, drawings, all of these. When you're looking at a photo, composition is always, or just overall a picture, all of these pictures are composed in a certain way for us to take information, to read this information. Think of it as in when we are looking at some concept art for this of a video game. Let's just take a Final Fantasy 15. They have these elements where we see the player avatar, we see the environment that they're in, and we'll see some sort of overwhelming task, whether that be a landmark, whether that be something of a object, elements like that, right? These are composed in certain ways to show that key information, reveal that, and relay it to the viewer. Now, there's many ways to compose or to get great composition. There's techniques of rule of thirds. The Fibonacci sequence, I believe, is what it's called. The perfect ratio, that circle. All of those out there. I've definitely not described that perfect circle well enough. But the big thing there is, again, it's you making sure that you relay all the correct information in that photo, and it's easy for the viewer to read. And that there is brilliant for other types of medium when we talk about picture, photo, all of this. But going back to the introduction of what I spoke about, the big difference there is the player doesn't have control, right? The viewer of your painting, of your photo, they're not in control really of how they see it, because we've captured or painted or drawn a moment in time that will forever be still. There is no progress in it, and we're controlling what's in view of this shot. What is it that the actual viewer is seeing, right? And that's kind of the big thing there. Now, again, I talked about rule of thirds and other techniques as well. You can use all of that. And we need to use composition in level design as well. There's a couple of great articles. I'll link them in the description down below. One was by a previous lead of mine, Mateusz why do I always struggle with your last name? Mateusz Pekiskiewicz. And he's got an incredible article that was on Gamma Sutra about it. So I'll be linking that one down below for us. So if you want to learn more about this technique with composition, you can check out that article. Now, as I said, we are going to give the player to control. We have moments where we compose a brilliant view. You see a lot of great views done in that of more traditionally single-player main missions, but it's not that we can't do them in open world. It's just there is more control versus that of open world games, because you never know which direction the player's coming in at. You never know where they are in terms of progress instead, right? But what we want to do is we compose these shots to maybe reveal a landmark. This there is the objective that the player needs to go off and follow. This here is where the player should be going. Okay, brilliant. But once they've moved away from that perfectly composed shot, how do they get there? What is it that we're going to do to make sure they move towards that landmark? Because you may not always see it in your level from every angle, right? Probably not, because again, especially if it's open world, especially if it's these hub worlds. So we need to use spatial composition in order to help move the player through. Okay, let's kind of go through the actual techniques that you can use. So again, just to sum up, spatial composition versus composition is the actual way that we structure layouts to actually push and pull players throughout that space, right? Composition in that of a shot is more how you read the shot. How a spatial composition, more how you move through a level, right? So there's more of the act of doing that is a big part of those elements, right? Okay, well then how do we actually make them move? Now we're going to be talking in that of a small kind of hub world is the examples I'm going to give. If you imagine you were designing a small section of an open world or a town, right? I'm going to be talking about how you can communicate this to all the other players, or to the players in your space throughout this.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
Now, with that in mind, let's talk about how to communicate with the player. What's the main objective route versus that of more side pass? The reason that I'm using more side pass is the fact is we obviously don't want just dead ends. Games are, as we all know, getting bigger, especially with new tech, with the latest generation, as well as much more rendering power, right? Unreal 5 is doing a lot. So this is why I'm giving this example, because I don't want for you to just create dead ends. There's ways to still keep the players entertained, still give them the illusion of space, and make the player actually go off and explore and find cool things. But as long as we're communicating with players, again, that what is the main goal, what is secondary or tertiary goals, it's all great to see from that there. All right, the first one let's talk about is color. This one you may not think necessarily applies to level design, right? You may think, oh yeah, well, the artist is going to come in, decorate it, do their incredible pass over it to make it look more than blocks. This is true, but we can do this already in blockouts right off the bat. If we're creating a small hub world, let's divide this up into sections. We have that of, say, residential, entertainment, and then let's imagine this is some sort of like mining town, right? We have work areas as well, okay? Okay, now you have, just for the sake of it, just 3 districts. You can go into more, but let's just go with this for now. Okay, well, in our blockout right off the bat, we can instantly go color label each of these. Residential, we can make it more blue. We can have something more entertaining, whether that be maybe a green or a purple for the entertainment district. And work, we can either dull it out because we may want the player to feel like they've had their life sucked out of them when they go to work, or maybe we want them to feel that they're in danger, so we can either make it a red, grey, something along these lines, right? So when we're creating the blockout, we can block out these districts, and again, you'll need to make sure this runs past all of your LD team to make sure that your visual language is all in unison, because that needs to be clear. But you could block out all these sections, make the houses, the buildings, all out of these primary color blocks. So instantly, when you hand it over to the environment artist, they know what district they're in, right? And if you're not going to do that actually on the blockout itself, okay, well, now we can add lights to it. We can change the colors on the lights to be matching that of the color theme that we have picked. So instantly there we can do something to make these all look distinguished. Oh, okay. So again, if this is more of a hub world where the player is constantly going in a loop, more of a circle around and traversing through all these spaces, you can do that. On Division, we picked colors for each one of our sub-districts, right? The ones that I primarily worked on was Turtles Bay and Kips Bay. There was other, incredible LDs and environment artists working on Flatiron District was green. Turtles Bay was more of a blue, if I'm remembering correctly. Gramercy was orange. And the artist did a great job of picking these colors. And again, these would normally come in during the nighttime, just because, again, there's not much light shining during the daytime. But small things like this can help the player realize when they've crossed borders. There's other ways to do it as well. But small things like this again. So color is a powerful tool. You can use it. There's probably other more creative ways you can do it in your Blockout than just lights and the color of blocks that you're using. But again, a great way to help distinguish the areas. The next thing we can do is through grouping. And when I'm talking about grouping, I mean more of clustering the buildings together, right? How we group certain sections of buildings, whether that be all land, we can start to understand space. If you imagine that of the farmhouse from the Walking Dead series by Telltales, they had, borders and fences around that farmland. So it's not only believable because ranchers and farmers would have those around to make sure they would keep all of their livestock and cattle in one place, but you'd also be able to relay to the player, okay, this is the land here, this is when I'm crossing the barrier, crossing the border away from the ranch, okay? So you can do that with fences around that, or you can do it with how close buildings are together. You can instantly realize which buildings are connected when they're obviously right next to one another. You can open it up and you can have small intertwining either paths between them, or maybe you have kind of like an alley park behind them. So again, you all know they revolve around a certain area. Clustering and grouping your buildings together is a great way to, again, establish what's connected to it. If we have that of all these houses close together in the residential area we spoke about, okay, then we know that there's not much space for people to actually live, right? The buildings are on top of one another. We can establish that. If all these buildings are, multiple stories, but if they're multiple stories, okay, well, now we know, these are all together. But if we go to the entertainment district, all the bars are just one floor. Again, we're seeing that we're grouping this by height, not just necessarily by space we mentioned earlier, but by height as well. You can again start to put two and two together. Oh, this is where this is. These are connected near here. And by grouping things, we can also establish what are the valuable, or should we say the more interactable spaces versus the dead end spaces, right? Because not every building is enterable in any game, right? But we still want the illusion of space. We still want it to be clear to the player that, hey, AI still live here, AI still shop there. So we can do that by, again, clustering buildings closer together so they're not enterable. There's nothing the player can do to pass them. But if we want something to stand out, as I said, a farmhouse, maybe a factory, then we don't have any buildings near it, right? So we make this more present, that it's taking up more spaces versus everything being built on top of one another in the residential areas we spoke about. So again, grouping things together. You can group it in many different paths as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be like everything next to each other. As we said, we can do it through height. We can do it through layers. We'll talk about height and layers a little bit further in a different way soon. But you can do it in that way. And the same thing is architecture. Obviously, I've been going on and on about referencing, researching your architecture because it can really help make your levels more believable, but also give you some great inspiration to making something that's very entertaining and very different, right? And that there is something that's really important for you, not only as an LD, but also for the player, because you're creating something that's believable. You're looking at different elements that will inspire you too. But it is, again, as I said, when you're making these different regions, okay, well, we want this slum feeling in that of the residential area. So, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make these more out of containers, right? They've repurposed shipping containers, built them all together to make houses, to make kind of a shanty village. Okay, well, let's go to the next area where the drinks are. Okay, well, this is actually made of different materials and concrete. Well, now we know a lot of money is being pumped into these bars, right? And then if we want something that of the factory where the people would go work in this third district, let's make this out of steel and iron, make it feel soulless, make it feel like it's a machine and there is no actual like life around it, right? small things again that we instantly now are being able to visually distinct, not only because of architecture style, materials as well. All of that helps to push further the division in the spatial composition. But the spatial composition is being aware now because we're setting up the boundaries. Okay, if we want the factory, the working area to stand out, as I said, we're grouping the other districts away from it. We're making this one stand out more, the fact there's nothing around it, versus when we're in the entertainment district or the residential district, there's a lot more going on to distract us, yet that of the factory, there's only one thing to focus on, which is the factory, right? The next thing we'll talk about then is that of spacing. Now, I've mentioned this briefly before, and it's not a huge, once I say it, you'll recognize it off the bat. One of the things I learned as soon as I got into CD Projekt Red was how do we actually, again, subconsciously communicate what's on the route to the main path. Now, this is not a hard rule. This is something just as a rule of thumb. You don't always be able to do it due to spacing, etc. But what we tried to do was main routes would be, or the generic route, would be that through a double door. Your side path would be through single doors. So again, it helps communicate the value because there's more time spent on this space versus that of, more time spent. There's more space to draw in the eye with these double door versus a single door. And again, can just create some gauging. Same thing with pathing. If the main route on through the districts that we travel through is, shall we say, 6 meters, then the side route should be 2 to 3 meters. Now, just as a hint here for your metrics, these main paths and side paths should normally be double or half of one another. The reason being is players not going to be able to read centimeters when they're running, getting shot at, sliding, jumping, right? It's much easier to read that through double sizes, so it's clear for the player's vision elements on that there. So instantly we can do that. And then finally we can do to help with spatial composition is height. We can put something taller, we can put it lower. So if we put something like the factory on the highest raised area, again, it stands out. We're probably going to be able to see it from all these regions, and it makes it feel more looming, that it's very present regardless when we're trying to get away. But if we put that of the residential area on a lower plane, we have to go down to visit it. Okay, well, again, it shows you how little people care about their own living conditions because their focus is only work and then probably drinking or an escapism from there, right? So these elements can help to create spatial composition. All of these, when adding it together, can actually make your levels guide and subconsciously communicate players as they run through each space. So I hope that's helped everything there. I said I got to wrap it up because I need to head off. But it's been a fun one to talk about. I hope it has helped, as I said. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me over on Twitter, which is @MaxPairs. You can email into the show, leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And you can support the show through Patreon, patreon.com/leveldesignlobby. And if you want to read my books, both of them are released right now, one focusing on combat and the other one through exploration. So I hope that helped. Consider this when you're blocking out your spaces. Again, how we can reach and communicate with our players subconsciously. Take care, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe no matter where you're listening. All the best. Recommend to a friend. And I'll catch you all next time.